Thunder roared in the distance as Lillian Owens clutched her sister's trembling hands in the darkness of the abandoned church. Their whispered prayers barely audible above the howling wind that threatened to tear the weathered structure apart. It was 1878 in the unforgiving territory of Arizona, and the two women had nowhere else to turn. "Please, Lord," Lillian whispered, her voice breaking. "We need a miracle tonight." The door to the church crashed open, causing both women to gasp and huddle closer together. A silhouette stood framed against the stormy night sky, tall, broad-shouldered, with a distinctive cowboy hat. Water dripped from his long coat as he stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of rain, leather, and horses. "Beggin' your pardon, ladies," came a deep, resonant voice. "Didn't mean to frighten you." Lillian felt her sister Lucy's fingernails digging into her skin. They had good reason to fear strangers, especially men, after what they'd been through. Yet something in the stranger's respectful tone made Lillian lift her head to peer through the darkness. "Are you alone in here?" the man asked, keeping his distance as he removed his hat. Lightning flashed, illuminating a rugged face with a strong jaw, kind eyes, and a short beard flecked with raindrops. "Yes," Lillian answered cautiously. "My sister and I were caught in the storm." The stranger nodded. "Name's Reid O'Malley. I was tracking my cattle when the storm hit, saw the light from your lantern." He gestured to the small oil lamp between them, its flame barely keeping the darkness at bay. "Mind if I wait out the worst of it with you ladies?" Lucy pressed closer to Lillian's side. At 19, 2 years younger than Lillian, she had always been the more timid of the two. The death of their parents 6 months ago had only made her more fragile, and the recent events had nearly broken her spirit completely. "You may stay," Lillian finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We were just praying." Reid hung his dripping coat on a broken pew and sat down at a respectable distance. "Don't let me interrupt. Seems like a good night for praying." Lillian observed him warily. Unlike most men who pass through Copper Creek, he didn't stink of whiskey or look at them with predatory eyes. His movements were measured, careful, as though he understood their fear. "You ladies from around these parts?" Reid asked after a few minutes of silence. "We were," Lillian replied. "Our farm is about 5 miles east of here, or was." Reid's expression changed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The Owens place," Lillian nodded, surprised. "You know of it, heard about what happened. Terrible business." His voice hardened. "They say Waylon Hadley's gang was behind it." At the mention of Hadley's name, Lucy whimpered. Lillian put an arm around her sister protectively. "I'm sorry," Reid said softly. "Didn't mean to upset you further." "It's not your fault," Lillian said. "But yes, Hadley and his men burned our farm 3 days ago. We've been hiding ever since. They want the deed to our land. There's a water source that runs through it." "And your parents?" Reid asked gently. "Gone," Lillian whispered. 6 months now. Fever took them both within days of each other." Reid's eyes showed genuine sympathy. "I'm truly sorry for your loss." Thunder boomed directly overhead, making the old church tremble. Lucy buried her face against Lillian's shoulder. "The storm's bad," Reid noted. "This old place might not hold." "We have nowhere else to go," Lillian admitted. "Hadley's men are watching the town." "We can't go to the sheriff, he's in Hadley's pocket." Reid considered this information, his brow furrowed in thought. "My ranch is about 10 miles west of here. You'd be safe there, at least until we figure something out." Lillian stiffened. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." Reid's eyes met hers, steady and clear. "My ma raised me to believe that when you see folks in trouble, you help them, no questions asked." He paused. "I've had my own run-ins with Hadley. Man tried to force me to sell my land last year." "What happened?" Lucy asked, speaking for the first time. A small smile touched Reid's lips. Let's just say he discovered I wasn't as easy to intimidate as he expected. Another crash of thunder, and suddenly water began to drip through the ceiling. "This place won't last the night," Reid said, standing up. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but staying here isn't safe. My horse is strong enough to carry all three of us for a short distance. I have a wagon and team hidden in a grove about a mile from here." Lillian hesitated, weighing their options. Stay and risk the church collapsing, or trust this stranger who seemed different from the other men they'd encountered. "Lily," Lucy whispered, "I think we should go with him." Surprised by her sister's words, Lillian looked into Lucy's eyes. Despite her fear, there was a certainty there that Lillian hadn't seen since before the fire. "All right," Lillian decided. "But know this, Mr. O'Malley, we have a pistol and I know how to use it." Reid nodded, respect in his eyes. "I'd expect nothing less, Miss Owens, and please call me Reid." Within minutes, they had gathered their meager belongings, a small bundle of clothes, their father's Bible, and the deed to their land hidden in Lillian's boot. Reid helped them onto his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood steady despite the storm. The rain pelted them mercilessly as Reid led them through the darkness, one hand on the reins, the other holding his hat against the wind. Lillian clung to the saddle horn with Lucy behind her, arms wrapped tightly around her waist. After what seemed like hours but was likely only 40 minutes, they reached a dense grove where a covered wagon and a team of 2 horses waited, sheltered somewhat by the trees. "My ranch hand Miguel brought these earlier," Reid explained as he helped them down. "He's a good man. Loyal." The wagon provided better protection from the elements. Reid draped a thick blanket around the sisters' shoulders before climbing up front to drive. Despite her exhaustion, Lillian remained vigilant, watching Reid's every move, her hand never far from the hidden pistol in her skirt pocket. As they traveled through the night, the storm gradually subsided. Lucy fell asleep against Lillian's shoulder, but Lillian forced herself to stay awake, staring at Reid's broad back as he guided the horses through the darkness. "You can rest, Miss Owens," he said without turning around, as though sensing her watchful gaze. "We've still got a few hours' ride ahead." "I prefer to stay alert," she replied stiffly. Reid glanced back at her, his expression unreadable in the faint moonlight now breaking through the clouds. "Fair enough, but you're safe with me, I give you my word." "The word of a stranger doesn't mean much these days, Mr. O'Malley." "No," he agreed, turning back to face the trail. "I suppose it doesn't. You'll have to judge me by my actions then." Dawn was breaking when they finally arrived at the O'Malley ranch. It was larger than Lillian had expected, a sturdy main house with a wide porch, a barn, bunkhouse, and several corrals filled with cattle and horses. 2 men were already up and working, tending to animals. "Miguel," Reid called to a man leading a horse from the barn. "We have guests." The man approached, his expression curious but not unwelcoming. He was perhaps in his 40s, with graying hair at his temples and kind eyes. "These are the Owens sisters," Reid explained. "They'll be staying with us for a while. Hadley's gang burned them out." Understanding crossed Miguel's face. "The señoritas are welcome here." He tipped his hat to them respectfully. "I will prepare rooms in the house." "Thank you, Miguel," Reid said. He turned to Lillian and Lucy as he helped them down from the wagon. "Miguel's wife, Rosa, is our cook. She'll fix you something to eat once you've had a chance to rest and clean up." The inside of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, clean and well-maintained, with solid furniture and even a few touches of refinement that suggested a woman's influence at some point in the past. "This was my parents' home," Reid explained as he showed them to 2 adjacent rooms. "They've been gone 5 years now. I've tried to keep it the way my mother liked it." "It's lovely," Lucy said softly, looking around with wide eyes. Reid smiled at her. "Get some rest. You're safe here." When he'd gone, Lillian pulled Lucy into her room and closed the door. "What do you think?" she asked her sister. Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the clean quilt. "I think God answered our prayers, Lily. In that church, we were asking for help for safety. And then he appeared." Lillian wasn't so quick to believe. "We still need to be careful, Lucy." "We don't know him." "But you feel it too," Lucy insisted. "There's something different about him. He's not like the others." Lillian couldn't deny the truth in her sister's words. There was something about Reid O'Malley that inspired trust, despite her determination to remain guarded. Still, she'd learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. "We'll see," was all she said before helping her sister settle in for some much-needed sleep. Lillian herself was too restless to sleep. After washing up with the clean water and basin provided, she changed into her spare dress, faded blue calico, patched in several places but clean, and ventured out to explore. She found Reid in what appeared to be a study, poring over some papers at a desk. He looked up when she entered, rising immediately to his feet. "Miss Owens, I thought you'd be resting." "I needed to understand our situation better," she said frankly. "Hadley won't stop looking for us. He wants our land, and he's not a man who gives up easily." Reid gestured for her to sit in a chair opposite his desk. "No, he's not. But you're safer here than anywhere else in the territory right now. Hadley and I have an understanding." Lillian raised an eyebrow. "What kind of understanding?" "The kind that involves several of his men returning to town with broken bones after they tried to intimidate me," Reid said with a grim smile. "Hadley respects strength. After that incident, he's kept his distance from my property. You fought them off alone, had some help from my men." Reid leaned back in his chair. "Miss Owens, I need to ask, do you still have the deed to your land?" Lillian tensed. "Why do you ask?" "Because that's what Hadley wants. As long as you have it, you and your sister are in danger." After a moment's hesitation, Lillian reached into her boot and pulled out a folded, somewhat water-damaged document. "Our father left it to us. It's all we have left of him." Reid nodded, understanding. "May I see it?" With reluctance, she handed it over. Reid examined it carefully, his expression thoughtful. "This deed is legal and binding," he said finally. "Your father's signature properly witnessed. Hadley can't challenge this in court, which is why he's resorting to intimidation and violence." He handed it back to her. "Keep it safe." "What does Hadley want with our land?" Lillian asked, tucking the deed away again. "It's just a small farm. It's the water," Reid explained. "Your property contains one of the key access points to Cottonwood Creek. Whoever controls that water in this part of the territory controls everything. Hadley's been buying up land all around there, but your father refused to sell." "And now we're refusing," Lillian said firmly. Reid studied her with new respect. "You're not planning to sell, even after everything that's happened. That land is our heritage, our future." Lillian lifted her chin. "I intend to rebuild, once Hadley is no longer a threat." A slow smile spread across Reid's face. "You're either the bravest or the most stubborn woman I've ever met, Miss Owens." "Perhaps both," she replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips for the first time since their meeting. The door opened, and a plump, middle-aged woman with a kind face entered carrying a tray. "Ah, the señorita is awake. I am Rosa. I have brought you something to eat." "Thank you," Lillian said, suddenly aware of her hunger. Rosa set down the tray containing hot coffee, fresh bread, eggs, and bacon. "You are too thin, both of you. We will fix that." She patted Lillian's shoulder maternally before leaving. Reid stood. "I should check on the cattle. Please make yourself at home. Your sister too when she wakes." After he'd gone, Lillian ate gratefully, savoring the first hot meal she'd had in days. Through the window, she could see Reid in the distance, riding out with several ranch hands. Despite her wariness, she found herself watching him, noting the confident way he sat his horse, how the men around him seemed to respect him. Perhaps, just perhaps, they really had found safety. The next few days fell into a pattern. Lucy quickly became comfortable at the ranch, helping Rosa in the kitchen and even venturing out to the small garden behind the house. Lillian, however, remained vigilant, unable to fully relax despite the hospitality they were shown. Reid respected her wariness, never pushing for more trust than she was willing to give. He spent much of his time working with his cattle and horses, but always made time each evening to sit with the sisters after dinner, sometimes reading aloud from one of the many books in his study. On the fourth night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Reid brought up a subject Lillian had been avoiding. "We need to discuss what happens next," he said quietly. "You can't hide here forever, though you're welcome to stay as long as needed." Lillian nodded, having expected this conversation. "I've been thinking about that. The sheriff may be in Hadley's pocket, but the federal marshal isn't, if we could get word to him." "I've already sent Miguel to the telegraph office in Tucson," Reid admitted. "He should be back tomorrow with a response." Surprised, Lillian turned to him. "You did that without telling me. You were already carrying enough worry," Reid said simply. "I thought I could at least lift that burden." Lucy, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "That was kind of you, Reid." Lillian couldn't argue with that, though she wished he had consulted her first. "What exactly did you tell the marshal?" "The truth. That Waylon Hadley has been terrorizing landowners, that he burned out the Owens farm, and that 2 young women are in danger because they refuse to surrender their legal property rights." Reid looked at her steadily. "I also mentioned that you have the deed safely in your possession and can prove ownership." Lillian considered this. "And if the marshal comes, what then? Hadley has at least 15 men. The marshal might bring a deputy or 2 at most." "The law carries weight, even out here," Reid said. "And Hadley, for all his bullying, isn't foolish enough to openly fight federal authorities." "You sound very certain." Reid's expression darkened. "I know men like Hadley. They prey on those they perceive as weak. When faced with equal or greater strength, they back down." They fell silent, watching as the last rays of sun painted the distant mountains gold. Lucy excused herself to help Rosa with some mending, leaving Lillian and Reid alone on the porch. "May I ask you something, Mr. O'Malley?" Lillian said after a while. "I thought we'd agreed on Reid," he replied with a slight smile. "Reid, then," she conceded. "Why are you doing all this for us? The truth, please." He was quiet for a long moment, considering her question. "When I found you 2 in that church praying in the darkness, it reminded me of my mother and sister after my father died. They had that same look, frightened but determined to survive." He turned to face her directly. "The ranch next to ours was owned by a man named Davis. He saw their vulnerability and tried to take advantage. If not for the help of neighbors who stood up for them, I don't know what would have happened." Lillian felt a new understanding of this man forming. "So you're repaying an old debt, in a way." Reid's eyes held hers. "But it's more than that. What Hadley's doing is wrong. And you and your sister, you deserve better." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Lillian's heart that she'd thought had hardened beyond reach. For the first time since their parents' death, she felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Reid nodded, and they sat in companionable silence as darkness fell over the ranch. The next day brought Miguel's return and news. The federal marshal would arrive within the week. This should have been a relief, but Lillian's unease only grew. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't pinpoint what. Her suspicions proved correct late that afternoon. Lucy came running into the house, face pale with fear. "Riders coming," she gasped. "At least 10 of them." Reid appeared from the study, his expression grim. "Hadley," he said, moving quickly to a cabinet where he kept his firearms. "Miguel spotted them earlier from the North Ridge. I was hoping they'd pass by." "How did they find us?" Lillian asked, fear gripping her heart. "Someone in town must have talked," Reid said, checking his rifle. "Get your sister upstairs, Miss Owens. Stay there until I come for you." For once, Lillian didn't argue. She hurried Lucy upstairs to the bedroom farthest from the front of the house, the one with the smallest window. "What's going to happen?" Lucy whispered, trembling. "Reid will handle it," Lillian assured her, with more confidence than she felt. Through the small window, she could see Reid standing on the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. 4 of his ranch hands had positioned themselves strategically around the property, all armed. The riders approached slowly, and even from a distance, Lillian recognized Waylon Hadley at their head, a tall man with a shock of white blonde hair and cold eyes. They stopped about 20 yards from the house. "O'Malley," Hadley's voice carried clearly. "I hear you're harboring some fugitives." "No fugitives here, Hadley," Reid replied calmly. "Just guests. Those Owens girls stole something that belongs to me. I want it back." Reid shifted slightly, his stance relaxed but ready. "Can't steal what was never yours, Hadley. They have the deed to their land, fair and legal." A tense silence followed. Even from upstairs, Lillian could feel the hostility emanating from Hadley's men. One of them, a burly man with a scarred face, muttered something to Hadley, who laughed coldly. "Listen, O'Malley," Hadley called. "I've got no quarrel with you. Give us the girls and the deed and we'll be on our way. No one gets hurt." "Can't do that," Reid answered. "You know how this works, Hadley. My land, my rules. The ladies are under my protection now." Hadley's face darkened with anger. "You're making a mistake, O'Malley. I've got 15 men." "You've got what, 5? Those aren't good odds." "Maybe not," came Reid's steady reply. "But I like our chances better than yours. First man who draws will be dead before he clears leather. I guarantee it." The standoff continued, neither side willing to back down. Lillian held her breath, one arm around Lucy, the other clutching the small pistol she'd kept with her. Finally, Hadley spat on the ground. "This isn't over, O'Malley. Not by a long shot." He jerked his head at his men. "We're leaving. For now." The riders turned their horses and slowly rode away, several of them casting threatening looks back at the ranch. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Lillian release the breath she'd been holding. Lucy sagged against her, relief evident in her face. "It's not over," Lillian murmured, knowing Hadley wouldn't give up so easily. A knock on the door made them both jump. "Miss Owens, Miss Lucy," Reid called. "They're gone." Lillian opened the door to find Reid standing there, his face grim but composed. "They'll be back, won't they?" she asked. "Yes," he replied honestly. "But not today. They need to regroup, plan. We've bought ourselves some time." "Time for what?" Lucy asked, her voice small. "Time for the marshal to arrive," Reid said. "And time for us to prepare just in case." The days that followed were tense with waiting. Reid doubled the guards around the ranch and sent one of his men to Tucson to hurry the marshal. Lillian insisted on learning to shoot better, and Reid spent hours with her at an improvised target range behind the barn, improving her already decent marksmanship. During these lessons, Lillian found herself watching Reid's face as much as she focused on her shooting, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at a good shot, how gentle his hands were when adjusting her grip on the pistol, the quiet strength in his voice as he offered instruction. "You're a natural," he told her after she hit 5 targets in succession. "Your father teach you?" Lillian nodded, lowering the gun. "He believed every woman should know how to defend herself in these territories." "Smart man," Reid commented, taking the pistol to reload it. Their hands brushed, and Lillian felt an unexpected warmth spread through her at the contact. When she glanced up, Reid was watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "Lillian," he said, using her first name for the first time. When this is over, a shout from the direction of the house interrupted him. Miguel was waving urgently. "Riders coming from the south," he called. Reid and Lillian hurried back, both fearing Hadley's return. But as the riders came into view, Reid relaxed. "It's the marshal," he said, recognizing the official badge glinting in the sunlight. Marshal James Buchanan was a tall, imposing man with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. He arrived with 3 deputies, all looking trail-worn but alert. "O'Malley," the marshal greeted Reid with a handshake. "Got your message. These the Owens girls." Lillian stepped forward. "I'm Lillian Owens, Marshal. This is my sister, Lucy." The marshal nodded to them both. "Miss Owens, I'll need to see that deed and hear your account of what happened." Inside the house, Lillian recounted the events of the past weeks: her parents' deaths, Hadley's increasing pressure to sell, the threats, and finally the burning of their farm. She produced the deed, which the marshal examined carefully. "This is all in order," he confirmed. "Hadley has no legal claim to your property. His actions constitute criminal harassment, arson, and attempted theft at the very least." He handed the deed back to her. "You have my word we'll bring him to justice." "He won't go easily," Reid warned. "He has men, influence." "So do I," the marshal replied grimly. "We'll be staying here tonight if that's acceptable. Tomorrow we ride to Copper Creek to arrest Waylon Hadley." That evening, an unusual atmosphere pervaded the ranch house, tense yet hopeful. After dinner, while the marshal and his deputies discussed strategy with Reid in the study, Lillian slipped out onto the porch, needing a moment alone with her thoughts. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Lillian wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, thinking of all that had happened since that stormy night in the abandoned church. It seemed a lifetime ago now. The creak of the door announced Reid's presence before he spoke. "Mind some company?" "Not at all," she replied, making room for him on the bench. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Marshall thinks we should leave at first light, catch Hadley before he hears we're coming. Will you go with them?" she asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to her. "Yes," Reid said simply. "This involves me now." Lillian turned to look at him, studying his profile in the moonlight. "Because of us. Because we brought this trouble to your door." Reid shook his head, meeting her gaze. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because—" he hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. "Because I care what happens to you, Lillian, to both of you, but especially to you." Her heart quickened at his admission. "I care about you too," she said softly. "More than I expected to. More than I thought possible after everything." Reid reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, reverent. "When I found you both praying in that church," he said, "I had no idea how much my life was about to change. I thought I was just offering shelter to 2 women in need. I never expected to feel this way," Lillian finished for him when he trailed off. "Yes." His eyes held hers, filled with emotion. "I never expected to meet someone like you, Lillian Owens. Someone so brave, so determined, so—" he smiled softly. "So stubborn." Lillian laughed quietly, the sound surprising her. How long had it been since she'd laughed? "My father always said my stubbornness would either be my downfall or my greatest strength." "I'm betting on strength," Reid said, his smile fading into seriousness. "Lillian, I know this isn't the right time with everything that's happening. But I need you to know that whatever comes tomorrow, my feelings won't change." "Nor will mine," she whispered, and found she meant it completely. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to back away. Instead, Lillian moved to meet him, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle yet filled with promise. His hand came up to cradle her face, and she leaned into his touch, feeling for the first time in months that she had found a place where she truly belonged. When they parted, Reid rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he murmured, "we'll have time to see where this leads. But know that whatever happens, you and Lucy will always have a home here." Lillian nodded, too full of emotion to speak. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and drawing strength from each other's presence for whatever the morning might bring. Dawn broke clear and bright. The marshal and his men prepared to ride, along with Reid and two of his most trusted ranch hands. Lillian watched from the porch as they saddled their horses, her heart in her throat. Reid approached her before mounting, his eyes serious. "Stay inside today. Miguel and the others will keep watch. Be careful," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Hadley is dangerous. I know." He took her hand briefly, squeezing it. "We'll be back before nightfall." As the riders disappeared down the trail, Lucy came to stand beside her sister. "He'll come back," she said with surprising certainty. "I can feel it." Lillian wanted to believe her. The morning passed slowly, each hour dragging by. By midday, Lillian was too restless to stay inside. She found herself in the barn grooming Reid's spare horse, a gentle bay mare. "You are worried, Señorita," Rosa observed, appearing in the doorway. "But Mr. Reid, he is smart. And the marshal, he is experienced." "I know," Lillian sighed. "I just can't help thinking about everything that could go wrong." Rosa patted her arm sympathetically. "This is what happens when we give our hearts. No, we worry." Lillian looked at the older woman sharply. "Is it that obvious?" Rosa smiled. "Only to those with eyes to see. Mr. Reid, he looks at you the way my Miguel looked at me 30 years ago, and you look at him the same way." Before Lillian could respond, they heard shouts from the direction of the house. Running outside, they saw Miguel pointing toward the road. In the distance, riders were approaching, too many to be just the marshal's party. "Get inside," Miguel ordered, his expression grave. "Bar the doors." Heart pounding, Lillian grabbed Rosa's hand and they hurried to the house where Lucy was already closing shutters. Within minutes, they had barred the doors and positioned themselves away from windows. "It's Hadley," Miguel confirmed after a quick look. "At least a dozen men." Lillian felt cold fear grip her heart. Had something happened to Reid and the marshal? Were they walking into a trap? "We need to be ready to defend ourselves," she said, retrieving her pistol from her room. "Lucy, stay with Rosa in the root cellar." "No," Lucy said with unexpected firmness. "I'm staying with you." There was no time to argue. The riders were closing in, and Lillian could now hear Hadley's voice calling out demands. "Come out, O'Malley. Bring the Owens girls and that deed." Miguel positioned himself by a window, rifle ready. "He does not know the marshal and Mr. Reid are gone," he murmured. "This could work in our favor." "How many guns do we have?" Lillian asked, trying to think clearly through her fear. "4 rifles, your pistol, and Rosa has a shotgun she knows how to use," Miguel replied. "We are outnumbered, but we have the house." Outside, Hadley was growing impatient. "You have 1 minute, O'Malley, or we start shooting." Lillian made a quick decision. "Lucy, take this," she said, handing her sister the pistol. "Only use it if someone breaks in." To Miguel, she said, "Cover me. I'm going to talk to them." "Señorita, no," Miguel protested. "They don't know Reid isn't here," Lillian explained. "I can stall them, maybe long enough for the marshal to return." Before Miguel could stop her, Lillian moved to the front door. Taking a deep breath, she called out, "Mr. Hadley, Reid O'Malley isn't here." There was a moment of confused silence outside. "Who's speaking?" Hadley demanded. "Lillian Owens." Mr. O'Malley left at dawn, but he'll be back, and he won't be alone. She could hear Hadley conferring with his men, their voices too low to make out the words. Finally, Hadley called back, "Come out where I can see you, Miss Owens, unarmed." "Not a chance," she replied. "You burned my home, threatened my sister. Why would I trust you now? Because if you don't, we'll burn this house too with you inside it." Hadley shouted, his patience clearly at an end. Lillian exchanged a look with Miguel. The threat was not an idle one. "I'll come out on the porch," she decided. "No further, and your men stay back." Before anyone could stop her, Lillian unbarred the door and stepped onto the porch, leaving the door open behind her so Miguel could cover her if needed. She stood tall, refusing to show fear though her heart hammered in her chest. Hadley sat on his horse about 20 feet from the porch, a cruel smile on his face. His men were spread out in a semicircle behind him, all armed. "Well, well," Hadley drawled. "The elder Owens girl, where's your sister?" "Safe," Lillian replied coldly. "What do you want, Hadley?" he laughed. "You know what I want, that deed. Your land has the water I need for my cattle operation. It's not for sale. I'm not looking to buy it anymore." Hadley's voice hardened. "You've caused me too much trouble for that. Now I'm just going to take it." "The law won't let you," Lillian said, praying the marshal would return soon. "The federal marshal already knows what you've done." Hadley's smile faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Where do you think Reid O'Malley is right now?" "He and Marshal Buchanan rode for Copper Creek at dawn to arrest you." Uncertainty flickered across Hadley's face, quickly replaced by anger. "Arrest me? On whose authority?" "The United States government," came a stern voice from behind Hadley's men. "Drop your weapons, all of you." Lillian's heart leaped as Marshal Buchanan appeared on the road, flanked by his deputies, Reid and his ranch hands. They had circled around, approaching from behind Hadley's position. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of Hadley's men panicked, reaching for his gun. The marshal's deputy fired first, hitting the man in the shoulder. Another of Hadley's men drew, and suddenly gunfire erupted. Lillian ducked back into the doorway as bullets splintered the wood around her. Miguel pulled her inside, slamming the door shut. The gunfight was brief but intense. When it ended, Lillian heard Reid's voice calling her name. She rushed to the door, flinging it open to see him running toward the house, unharmed. "Are you all right?" he demanded, scanning her for injuries. "Yes," she managed, relief making her dizzy. "Lucy and Rosa too, what happened?" Reid turned to look back at the scene. The marshal and his deputies had Hadley and his remaining men surrounded. Several bodies lay motionless on the ground, and others were wounded. "It's over," Reid said simply. "Hadley tried to fight, but he didn't stand a chance. The marshal had positioned men all around while I created a distraction at the front of the property. We caught them in a crossfire." Lillian sagged against him, the tension of the past weeks finally breaking. Reid's arms came around her, strong and secure. "You're safe now," he murmured into her hair. "It's really over." In the days that followed, Hadley and his surviving men were taken to Tucson to await trial. The marshal assured Lillian and Lucy that with the evidence they had, along with testimonies from other landowners Hadley had terrorized, he would spend many years in prison. On a warm evening a week later, Lillian stood on the porch of the O'Malley ranch, watching the sunset. So much had changed in such a short time. The deed to their land was safely stored away, and plans were already being made to rebuild their farm with significant improvements, thanks to Reid's assistance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Reid said, joining her on the porch. Lillian smiled, leaning slightly against him as his arm circled her waist. "Yes, peaceful. I've been thinking," Reid said after a comfortable silence. "Your land and mine aren't that far apart. With the right management, They could be combined into one of the most productive operations in the territory. Lillian looked up at him, understanding the unspoken question in his words. "Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. O'Malley?" He smiled, turning to face her fully. "Not exactly, Miss Owens." Taking her hands in his, he continued, "I'm proposing something much more permanent, something that would join not just our lands but our lives." Lillian's heart swelled with emotion. "That sounds suspiciously like a marriage proposal." "It is," Reid confirmed, his eyes full of love. "I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Lillian Owens. Will you marry me?" The answer came easily, naturally, as if her heart had known all along. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Their kiss sealed the promise, tender and full of hope for the future. Behind them, Lucy appeared in the doorway, witnessing their embrace with a smile of pure joy. "I told you," she said when they finally noticed her presence. "That night in the church, when we were praying for help, for a miracle, I knew God had answered when Reid walked in." Lillian looked from her sister to the man who had risked everything to protect them, who had opened his home and his heart when they needed it most. "Yes," she agreed softly. "He was the answer to our prayers." Reid pulled them both into an embrace, the three of them forming a new family born from adversity but bound by love. As darkness fell and stars appeared overhead, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that the future they would build together would be even more beautiful than the sunset painting the sky.